Every week I get pitches in my pitches folder. That is, companies with news they want everyone to know. Here's my news that I've received this week and my take on it. Let's start with Versa Networks. Versa Networks has launched the industry's first SASE solution. That is the Secure Access Service Edge. I think that's like a Gartner thing. Delivering secure blah, 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 blah. What this announcement is, Versa's released the VSA, their secure access, Versa Secure Access product. And what this does is it gives you a whole bunch of things rolled into one client that you can roll out to a Windows box, to a Linux box, to Mac OS, or to iOS. So you're getting basically a super fancy VPN client. Think about it that way. What do I mean super fancy? Well, there's like security features. Look at this, security in the form of stateful firewall, denial of service protection, next generation firewall, IPS URL filtering on the end user's client devices. You get SD-WAN capability. Let me see if I can find it in here, but I know as I was reading up on this, this client will allow you to select between here it is, Wi-Fi, cellular, or wired, which is the better path, like you would with SD-WAN at the edge, right? And they're charging you, I think this release said $750 per client per month is where the pricing starts. Yeah, there it is. List prices start at $750 per user per month. You manage it via the cloud and all that kind of stuff. So that sounds super cool. It's an interesting product to me. I am scared to death of the complexity of this product as you have a user with a Mac that calls you and says, I can't get to the blah blah, and I have this funny error message kind of thing, and I imagine getting this right is going to be an awful lot of policy management, but very cool nonetheless. Next, Tigera, those guys. Well, Project Calico, all about networking for Kubernetes. They're offering training. Well, the latest class I noticed here, Understanding Kubernetes Networking, Ingress, and they've got a bunch of these if you scroll down through. And they're free for some definition of free, as in you don't have to pay for them. They're gonna educate you on how to do things with their Project Calico, which is open source, by the way, but Tigera, they're a commercial entity because of course they want you to buy their commercial offering. So I think what these are, they're live online training, right? That's how they're billing all of these different classes that you've got here. Fair enough, but it's not altruistic as you wouldn't expect that. You're gonna register, they're gonna know who you are, and they're gonna market to you after this to some degree, I would expect. I also expect that considering what's going on here, there's probably good value to be had from these classes. So don't dismiss it just because you have to register and now they have your name. There's probably stuff you can learn. Next, SolarWinds. The nice people at SolarWinds have announced lots and lots of things over the last couple of weeks. There's a quick one here at the top about Surview 2020.1 and some minor releases, but then if you scroll down to the June 4th release, they're talking about basically everything in their lineup being refreshed in some way or another. There's like a 2020.2. So if you're in the SolarWinds world, there's a whole bunch of updating that might be worth doing. Go check it out. All the core stuff here. Good old Orion, the engineer's tool set, Enterprise Operations Console, IPAM Log Analyzer, NCM, NPM, NTA. I've used most of these products over time, have been refreshed in some way. Lots and lots and lots of stuff going on there. Okay. Portshift. Portshift announces extended Kubernetes cluster protection, adding powerful security to the Kubernetes API. Why do I keep covering Kubernetes stuff? Because I think Kubernetes has still got some legs and I'm interested in this ecosystem while I watch Kubernetes succeed or fail. So I do like to keep up with what's going on in the Kubernetes ecosystem. Portshift is security in this world. So just reading the headline here. Extended Kubernetes cluster protection analyzes all cluster events, mitigate potential risks in cluster resources and worker nodes. Right, architecturally with Kubernetes you've got a cluster. Cluster is made up of nodes, and on nodes you run pods. There's the single unit of work in a Kubernetes cluster. So if you've got cluster events and cluster resources or worker nodes, you've got Portshift looking out for the kind of things you don't really want to think about when you're running Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is all about run the app and don't think about the infrastructure. Let Kubernetes figure all that stuff out for you. That's the magic. Meaning security fundamentally gets left off to the side. So you really want a tool that's going to handle that for you, and maybe Portshift is the answer here. There's lots of entrants into the Kubernetes security space. Next, we've got Aruba ESP. We talked about this on the Packet Pushers network on Network Break. So if you look at our Network Break channel at packetpushers.net, you can get more detail on Aruba ESP. But I got a big charge out of this, because if you read this particular press release, you will have no idea what this product actually does. So I just got to read this for you. It's awesome. Aruba, an HPE company, today introduced Aruba ESP, the industry's first AI-powered cloud-native platform that predicts and resolves problems at the network edge before they happen, built on AIOps, zero-trust network security, and a unified infrastructure for campus, data center, branch, and remote worker locations. Aruba ESP delivers an automated all-in-one platform that continuously analyzes data across domains, ensures SLAs, identifies anomalies, and self-optimizes. This is still one sentence, by the way, while seeing and securing unknown devices on the network. Oh, okay. What the heck does that do? I have no idea. I have no idea what any of that means. I do, actually. I was briefed on this product, but I just got such a charge out of this. Where you read these briefings and try to discern meaning, it can be really, really hard. So what is this? Here's a good diagram of this oh, there it is. So if you look at this diagram, you get the sense of what Aruba is trying to do here with ESP. ESP is an architecture. It is a way from the Aruba perspective that you can manage your entire network. The idea is you've got this Aruba Central product sitting at the top, and forget about the cloud native unified data lake, blah, blah, blah. Those are just marketing buzzwords about Aruba Central. Aruba Central is the thing that's looking at your network. It's bringing telemetry in from the network and then figuring out what's going on in your network as it analyzes that telemetry, and they're calling that AIOps. They're applying for marketing or otherwise. I don't know how they mean artificial intelligence, but they're using artificial intelligence is the claim here to figure out things about your network that you can't figure out because you're only one human and you're too busy. So Aruba Central is sitting on top of this diagram of what an Aruba network would be. You got an access point, you got a switch, you've got the all-seeing eye, Illuminati. Anyway, that's a made-up icon, but the whole idea is this is the entirety of your network. It's an Aruba network. You're running Aruba switches everywhere, and you can do that now. You can run them in the data center, you can run them in the campus edge. They've got all the pieces and parts. Aruba Central looks at this whole thing and comes up with actionable items, insights, lets you know what's going wrong. I love the claim of before it happens. That was, I don't know if I read that or not, but it was somewhere in one of these press releases where I read it can figure out things before it happens, I'm sure. And that's it for the news for this week. And next we're going to move on to our audience question of the week. Our question of the week this week comes from Justin. Justin says, I am passionate about networking and want to stay in a job that allows me to leverage my networking knowledge. However, I found that the pure Newtonian CLI-based network engineer role tends to be taxing on work-life balance. You are not wrong, Justin. Even as a mid-level to senior role. The engineer roles require travel to faraway locations, on-call rotations on the weekends and in the middle of the night. I went for years carrying a pager and a laptop with me. I said pager, now I'm old. Okay, sorry, Justin. Anyway, Justin says then, how would you recommend I move into a sector of network engineering where I can have a better work-life balance? No travel, no on-call, work from home days. Should I move into a more DevOps-based role? Should I move into a more software-heavy scripting automation role? Seems to me, he says, that the further you can distance yourself from hardware and operations-based roles, the closer a network engineer can come to achieving better work-life balance. Is this true? I've been in the industry for 5 years, have a CCNP Enterprise, CCNA, R&S, and I am currently studying for the IE. Will the IE help with moving in a direction towards more work-life balance, no on-call? Well, Justin, let's dig into your scenario here. You've got work-life balance problems, and so you want to know what role that you can take that would find a better work-life balance for you. So one thought here, and this is kind of, I think, in the form of bad news, in the infrastructure world, I don't think you escape this. If you're in infrastructure support role as an engineer, that is, you are hands-on with the equipment, the challenge here is you're really good at what you do, and therefore the buck stops with you for some number of challenges and problems that are going to come up on infrastructure from time to time. Infrastructure breaks, that's just the way of it. These things that we support, these firewalls and switches and routers and load balancers and all the rest of it. And then there's always the new project that you're working on, building out bill of materials for the stack of things that need to show up on a pallet so you can install them at some point, which you're going to have to do after hours or on the weekends, and so on. So work-life balance and all that stuff, if you're going to stay in the infrastructure role, again, like you said, what if I go into IE? Dude, I was never more on call than when I was in IE full time, and that was my, my role. I was on call. It changed subtly. I went from being on call in a rotation to being on call always. So I wasn't frontline. I wasn't like triage support, but I had to be available 24/7 by 365 to support whoever the triage people were that carried around the rotating beeper and that kind of thing. So that means the volume of calls I took went down, but my stress level was up. I couldn't go to a restaurant with my family without having a laptop and my phone with me. So I don't know that IE helps you with that necessarily, like, as you're saying, no on-call, no travel. Work from home days, you might be able to work from home more. I think that depends a lot on, your employer, and that certainly dumping your commute can improve your quality of life immeasurably, for sure. So let's look at some, more of your shift away kind of ideas here. More of a DevOps-based role, you say. More of a software-heavy scripting automation role. Again, man, I don't know. What you're really talking about is automation, where you're working on the application delivery side, where you're integrating infrastructure deployment with your application deployment. So as the app gets deployed, the infrastructure gets deployed alongside of it a lot of times. Or you're supporting a cloud architecture where you don't have to be down in the weeds all of the time, configuring VLANs and applying access lists and standing up VPN tunnels or whatever it might be that needs to be created for that application to be delivered. What you're talking about instead is having all of that automated and letting that infrastructure be consumed self-service. Does that mean you're on call less? Maybe. How stable is the infrastructure? Is it scaled right? Is it well designed? Do you have good load balancing geographically? Is this a fairly stable environment, or are there a fairly steady set of releases to production that are therefore going to introduce more potential problems? And I think that's going to be environment dependent. It is going to be dependent also on how did you do the automation? You're saying software heavy scripting, automation kinds of stuff. Well, how much are you doing there? Are you rolling your own? Are you, therefore, you're building a bunch of scripts and a bunch of playbooks or Terraform files where you're needed to tweak those fairly steadily as the infrastructure you're supporting changes? Because that's what you're doing when you go into those DevOps roles. You're trading in direct hands-on infrastructure support for building robots that does that bit for you, but someone's got to maintain the robots. Do you need to be on call for that kind of stuff all the time? And again, it goes back to, well, how much is your environment changing? The environments I've been where there was a lot of active infrastructure change, there was more intensity on my phone and in my inbox, and in meetings and conferences, planning things, reacting to things, recovering from things that didn't go well. But when the environment was in as a boss I had, like to put it, run and maintain mode, it was quiet, and the less we mess with stuff, the more stable things were, and they just worked. And I don't think you're going to find too many mature DevOps automation sort of environments because, dude, the technology that makes this stuff go keeps changing. I'm thinking through this as I consider your question, and I don't know, man. I got to say, I think for you, the most likely track is getting away from the hands-on stuff that demands the on-call, and you're going to do less travel, I think, with some of this automation stuff, because you're not, someone else is going to be racking and stacking, or you're going to be consuming AWS. You're not traveling anywhere for that. But the on-call, the need to support all the time is difficult to get away from unless you get into an architecture role. And by architecture, I mean you'll still be busy. You'll still have a lot of deliverables. You're still going to be doing a lot of testing and lab work, but you're less with the hands-on production environment that is affecting the business, and that is the revenue-creating technology stack that the business relies on. When you were in architecture, you were figuring out where the business needs to go and setting a direction, charting a course for the business to go in that direction. That's different from the hands-on, and so the on-call, I think, would fade for sure. You're going to be dealing with things more in business hours. Travel, that'll depend on the business for sure, whether or not you would be required to travel. There's going to be less rolling to a colo to rack and stack and cable. But there might be more in-person meetings, although considering we're moving to a post-pandemic world and we've all figured out how Zoom works, maybe there's not so much of that anymore, because gosh, you can get on a video call and then sort out a lot of the things that you might need to sort out with folks. So I think that would be the career track I'd want to go on. IE can be a stepping stone to architecture for sure. It's fair to point out that not all architecture roles are pure, in that you might not be living in the world of labbing and design and documenting and training, setting policy. It might also be hands-on. So if you start exploring architecture opportunities, you need to dig in at the company that is offering the position and find out, well, what does that really mean? And what does it mean for your work-life balance? So that's kind of a long-winded answer, Justin. I hope that was helpful. And if you're out there and you got a question for us, you can submit that on the packetpushers.net site. If you look for the follow-up page, the FU page, that would be one way to submit that as a contact form. You can just email me directly if you like, ethan@packetpushers.net. Our educational topic for today, EIGRP Stubs. The whole idea is to improve scaling of your EIGRP domains. And you're going, I don't care about EIGRP banks, I run OSPF. I know, but there's some of you out there that are still running EIGRP and you kind of ignore it. You go, router EIGRP1, done! And then you just kind of let it do its thing because that's been good enough. All right, I've run EIGRP networks as large as a couple of thousand routers, far from as large as you could go, but pretty sizable, and I've had to deal with some scaling challenges. One of the biggest tools I've found to help with EIGRP scaling are stub routers. Stubs help us with one straightforward problem, bounding our query scope within EIGRP. But what do I mean by query scope? What that is, when EIGRP is looking for a route that has been withdrawn, let's say if we look at our topology that one of the spokes no longer has one of his networks, he fell out of the routing table for whatever reason, and notifies his neighbors, the spoke would be have the two hubs as neighbors, says, yeah, that's gone. Those two neighbors, if there's no feasible successor, would go, oh, I wonder if there's somewhere else I could get that, and are going to query their other neighbors, hey, do you know where that route is? Hey, do you know where that route is? And as that query begins to move through the routing domain, every router along the way that gets asked the question, if it doesn't have an answer, it will ask its neighbors if it knows where that missing route might be. Now, way back in the day, we're talking about older EIGRP implementations, this could be a problem because you'd end up with a scenario where if in a very large EIGRP domain, this cascade of queries would result in the original router that asked the question sitting there waiting, not getting a response back from anybody, as everybody asked everybody else in the domain, do you know where this route is? A timer would expire and you'd end up with this quote-unquote stuck inactive situation that would cause, when that timer expired, a route neighbor to be reset, causing a topology convergence event. Ew, who wants that? We're dropping packets for a little while. Now, that doesn't happen in later versions of EIGRP, and you're probably not running a version of EIGRP that behaves that way. But why would we, even though EIGRP is improved, where we don't run into that SIA, stuck in active condition, so often anymore, why wouldn't we correctly build out the edge of our EIGRP domain to be stub routers? Okay, so what's a stub? Well, take a look at our topology here in GNS3. I've got these two hubs, I've got these two spokes. Ideally, these spokes would be configured as EIGRP stubs. That is, they're at the edge of the network. Don't send your queries to them, neighbors, because they're stubs. They're the edge of the EIGRP domain. They don't know where your missing route is. Just leave them alone about this, please. Therefore, you are bounding your EIGRP query scope. You've reduced it in size, and you've created an efficiency within your EIGRP domain. That's a good thing, especially, again, you're not going to notice this in a small domain with 10 routers. But when you get into hundreds or thousands of routers, these are the kinds of practices that you should employ. And I would argue, even if you've only got 10 routers, if you've got a hub and spoke topology like this, make your spokes stubs. It's just a good thing to do. What does this look like in EIGRP? Well, let's take a look. I'm logged into the 4 GNS3 routers that I configured to show off EIGRP stubs. Let's take a look at what our neighbors appear like from the Hub 1 perspective. So I'm logged into the Hub 1 router here. If I do show EIGRP neighbors, he shows that he's got 3 EIGRP neighbors, which he should. One of those is this one here, spoke 1, which he's configured to talk to across the 172.31.11.0/30 network. So that would be that neighbor right there, connected across gig 00001. So if I say show EIGRP neighbor gig 0001 and show me the detail, what do I see about this router? I see he's been up for a minute 39. We are not running bidirectional forwarding detection and a few other details. Okay, so let's go to spoke 1, which is the other end of that EIGRP neighbor relationship. Take a look at what our current EIGRP router configuration paragraph looks like. We've got basically a router ID and some interfaces that the router is listening on and announcing on, and that's it. Okay. Let's pop into the EIGRP paragraph and configure the spoke to be a stub. Remember, our goal here is to bound our query scopes. So stub routing is what we're going to use to do that. If I bring up the stub command, hit question mark, iOS, this is iOS XR 6.1.3 for what it's worth, gives me back these different choices here. Connected, receive only, redistributed, static, and summary as keywords that I can add behind the stub. The odd man out here is receive only, where I'm not telling the EIGRP process which kind of routes I want to announce as a stub router. Instead, I'm saying I don't want to announce any routes. I just want to be a receive only. But we could make a choice here. Do I want to announce connected, redistributed, static, or summary style routes? Or I could just leave it at default and just hit enter, and this will actually work. So now I can commit this. Since I'm on XR, I have to go through the commit process. Take a look at my EIGRP paragraph. There it is. There's the stub command that I've added. Let's see what this looks like now to my Hub 1 router. If I look at my neighbor detail, and I see I've got a change. Previously, we had this output. Now we see we've got some more characteristics here, a couple of important lines. So stub here is advertising. What kind of routes are being advertised? 2 kinds. Connected routes and summary routes, because that's what you get if you're left, if you leave the stub command by default. Connected and and summary style routes will be announced, which makes sense. That's probably what you want the EIGRP router there to announce, since he's a stub and there's nothing upstream from him because he's at the edge of the domain, right? If there are other EIGRP routers that are behind him, then he's not a stub, he's a transit router. Another thing that's interesting here in this detail output, what are we doing? We are suppressing queries, which was the point of the conversation, right? Hey, I'm not going to ask a stub router about things that I know he doesn't know because he's told me he's a stub. So we're job done here. Suppressing queries, we've proven that this is working. That's your tip for the day. That's Packet Exchange for this week. Send me your questions, ethan@packetpushers.net. I'll cover them here, or I'll find someone who does have the answer if I don't, and get them on the show and chat with them. And we'll see you next week.